here, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 4 of Silence. This one is titled Truth, which is perfect because the episode is all about finding the truth, or getting answers to important questions. It's like finding out who killed George, or who iced Mayor Jahns. We will make some progress with mental notes and finally get some answers to clues from earlier episodes. But before we get started, big shout out to the channel patrons, and with that I'd like to welcome Rodrigo Deodoro, the newest channel patron. Thank you for choosing to support the channel, Rodrigo. Your name will be in the credits of every video going forward. Now, if you're feeling generous like that and want to help out the channel, check out the Patreon link in the description. Can't forget the Discord gang. This is free to everyone, and it's a cool spot to chat about shows I cover on the channel. Link is also in the description. All right, you ready? We've got a lot to discuss, so let's get started. So this episode hits the ground running. We open to a scene where a family is in the middle of a medical crisis. A blue-faced young boy named Jacob is out cold on a table while an adolescent Juliette wheels out an oxygen tank for him. Juliette's mother, Hannah, seems to be leading the effort to save the kid, which might make you wonder why her father isn't the one handling things, since we know he is a doctor. But based on the way she talks, we can assume that she knows what she's doing. Anyway, mom is able to revive the kid with some help from the rest of the fam. It looks like he's gonna be okay. Rejoice. Note that during the scene, Juliette grabs a little stuffed toy and puts it in Jacob's hand to bring him comfort. Right after this scene, we're thrust right into current day Juliette's first day on the job, and it's a doozy. The last thing we saw in episode 3 was Mayor Jahns' apparent poisoning, so this is what Juliette is walking into. There are some interesting bits of dialogue here as Sims, Bernard, and Marnes discuss what happened and what to do next. Bernard and Sims are mainly concerned with the news getting out to the public and how people might react. They don't seem too broken up about the mayor of 40 years being assassinated. Marnes explains that he believes it was rat poisoning that was put into their water bottles, and he thinks that he was the actual target. Okay, so flashback for a moment. We're gonna go back to episode 3. Remember that mental note about the water bottles? Marnes said that her bottle was missing some water, as in maybe it had a leak. Marnes believes that because they drank from each other's water bottles instead of from their own respective bottles, that this is the reason why he's still alive and she is not. I also think it's good to take note of Bernard's reaction when they're discussing all of this. His facial expression and his responses are highly suspect. He has that painful grimace of someone who's realizing that they just messed up. Add to that the way that Juliette keeps giving him the side eye whenever he says anything, and there's enough reason to be at least a little suspicious. Needless to say, the whole situation stinks because of the timing. So let's put ourselves in Juliette's position for a moment. She walks in and finds that Jahns has been iced in, and she's already convinced that George was murdered. She must be wondering if there's a connection between the two mysterious deaths. Some mystery person or persons is out there doing dirt. After the opening credits, we're back with young Juliette in her family home. We learn that for some reason, both her mother and brother have passed away a few months prior. Juliette is trying to fix a broken chair that belongs to her deceased mother, Hannah. Dr. Nichols reminds her that she's gonna have to do a lot on her own because he's gotta be at work. This scene is meant to establish that Pops tends to put the job first, even when his daughter needs him the most. And this is a point of frustration for Juliette, who is too young to handle all of this on her own. It is a bit ironic when you think about it, because I get the feeling that he retreats into his work as a way of dealing with his pain in much the same way that Juliette uses fixing things to cope with her uglies. You can tell that he loves her though, and he means well, but he's coming up short in the supportive parent department at this critical moment in time. I think the difference between them is that Pops is more willing to accept things as they are, while Juliette needs to believe she can fix things that are broken. The next scene comes with a health warning. High sodium levels ahead. We bump into Sandy again, but this time for an impromptu orientation on Juliette's behalf. She's not happy with Holston's replacement, and I assume it's because she doesn't know who this chick is that's taking her boss's old spot, and to make things worse, this person is from the lowers. This is evident in the sarcastic comments about what you people eat down there. These two get off to a snippy start, with Sandy being as stubbornly obstinate as she can get away with. Key things to note here is that Juliette wants to find the file that she presumes is in the gun cabinet in the office, but Sandy is making her wait for the combination purely out of spite. Spicy. Also, note how Juliette keeps looking out of the window screen thingies, knowing that Holston's body is out there in the darkness, which should remind us of how he tried to avoid seeing Allison's body in the same way. The director chose to have her retrace some of his steps and locations, almost as a homage to him and a signal that his death is weighing on Juliette's mind. Juliette steps into the new apartment, which of course is Holston's old place. And within the first few moments, she turns her attention to the ventilation. All right, now don't get too excited. She does hear the rattling noise coming from inside it, but she doesn't investigate it just yet. Patience, young tinfoiler. While reading a note about recycling, Juliette's memory is triggered again. She's 13 years old, and she's stuck with the job of donating the belongings of her deceased relatives at the recycling center. She manages to hold on to that same little stuffed animal as a keepsake. It seems that she's on her own, forced to grow up fast because of the circumstances. So latchkey kid Juliette is back at the house, and she starts frying an egg, but walks away to resume fixing mom's old chair, and she forgets about what she's got on the stove. Classic cooking mistake. Pops comes home just in time to stop a small kitchen fire, because that's what parents do. The resulting frayed nerves leads to some choice words coming from both parties, and Juliette reveals that she blames her family's situation on her father. And Pops, in his own manner of speaking, reveals that he feels straight up helpless to do anything to help at the moment. In the next scene, a newly minted Mayor Holland is swearing in Juliette as Sheriff of the Asylum, and they get into it over the tape again. Notice the menacing way that Bernard asks the question about whether she stole the tape. Juliette responds by telling him that she liberated the tape for a much needed purpose. Bernard reminds her that he doesn't want her to have the job, but he's in no position to stand in the way of the mayor's decree. Juliette still needs to find that file on George, but she can't seem to make any headway. It's definitely not in the cabinet in Holston's office. Juliette is informed by Salty Sandy that Judicial has no George Wilkins file either, which of course is strange because there definitely should be one on record. So what's up with that? Anyway, she is surprised to find out that Holston left a note for her, and it's one of the clues from the first episode. The note that says, "Double the flowers in front of the mirror." Dun dun dun. If only she knew what that meant. Again, patience. Marnes is out on the silo streets investigating John's murder using the Marnes method of policing, which involves punching people until the case solves itself. Jokes aside, he is looking kinda messy. Juliette does her best to try to calm things down. Two have a chat over coffee. She then proceeds to spill the tea about what happened with her and Holston in the days leading up to his big exodus. Once Marnes sees the word truth carved into his old friend's badge, he's down to help. In exchange, he wants help in solving the mayor's murder. At this point, Juliette recognizes that the only people who are rooting for her are all the way down in the lowers. Up top, she's got no friends and already a few enemies. She needs allies. Who better than Marnes? Someone she knows is a stand-up guy who knew Holston well, even though she doesn't necessarily like him. We have a massive problem, and it's about the motive of the poisoner. We don't know who killed the mayor or even why. If we assume, like Marnes, that she wasn't the target of the assassination, then Marnes would have to be the intended target. But why him? I think the best guess is that someone wanted Marnes out of the picture because they think he knows whatever Holston and Allison found out that caused them to want to leave the silo. Marnes is a loose end that needs tying down. Remember, Allison made a lot of wild claims in that cafeteria for everyone to hear, so if she said something that was actually true, well, that would be a problem for the real powers behind the silo. Whomever the killer was, they wanted to make sure that anyone who was close to Allison is dealt with, just to ensure that the secret doesn't get out and spread through the silo. Note how Juliette's attitude towards Marnes softens in this scene when she realizes that Marnes was in love with Jahns. Before she leaves the room, a concerned Juliette tactfully tells Marnes not to do anything stupid to himself by mentioning that there are certain things a shotgun is not good for. She knows where he is mentally, and that's likely because she was there herself not too long ago. Okay, that's it. Young Juliette has had enough. She's packed her things, she grabs the stuffed toy, and then she puts it back, perhaps a symbolic gesture of letting go, and makes her way down to the lowers by herself. She's running away from home. We get to witness Juliette's first meeting with Walker, and it's basically Juliette demanding to be put on the job. Her love for fixing things becomes a way out of her home situation. At least here she can distract herself with the work of repairing what is broken. Walker seems amused by this kid's gumption and decides to take her on. Also note, Walker seems to have known Juliette's mother, Hannah Nichols. Anyway, I have to admit, it was kind of fun to see younger versions of characters like Sandy and Knox. It's also good to see that even back in the old days, Knox still wasn't actually doing any work. Also note how Juliette often sees young girls with their fathers, and it almost becomes a moment for her. This rift that she has with her father runs deep, and there might be as much regret as there is resentment welled up inside. So we get another flashback, and Walker has contacted Dr. Nichols, and he's waiting for Juliette in Walker's shop. This is like when your parents get called into the principal's office and you're the last one to show up. The scene was very interesting because Juliette insists on staying, but her father is not concerned with forcing her to come back home. No, he's actually more concerned with whether she is happy or not. Juliette's responses tell us a lot about her as a character. She says she's happy if she doesn't have to think about her loss. For Pops, knowing that she is happy even though she hates his guts at the moment, well, that's enough for him to leave her be despite how painful it must have been to do so. So Marnes is punching things again when he gets a visit from the Grim Reaper, aka Mr. Sims. This is another visit where Sims makes a quote-unquote low-pressure proposition on behalf of Judicial. Judge Meadows, a character we haven't met yet, has the power to remove Juliette and replace her with Billings if Marnes goes along with it. But we know that Marnes has chosen to ally himself with Juliette, so he plays coy and insinuates that they should just let things play out naturally because Juliette won't last as sheriff. So Sims slithers back to his lair or wherever he keeps his kid, and everything is cool. For now. Quick introduction, Lucas. This guy is always sitting in the cafeteria late at night. He introduces himself here, but we don't learn much about him yet, other than the fact that he's friendly and very persistent about it, but he will be someone to keep an eye on later. We need to know what he's doing out here every night though. Okay, so we're coming around to the home stretch. This is where things get crazy before the cliffhanger ending. Marnesy is listening to a conversation between Jules and Walker on the radio, and in it, Juliette confirms that she trusts Marnes and sees him as an ally. Walker tells Juliette that she's got something to show her. It looks like she's figured out how to access the data on the handycam from episode 2. We're in business. Juliette is back at her place again, and she finally takes an interest in the noise coming from the vent. It looks like we will get to find out what Holston was hiding in there. She pulls on a washer which is tied to a string, and with that comes a folder, and in that folder she finds George's file. Yahtzee. A drunk Marnesy stumbles back into his house when he is ambushed by a guy who looks like he's dressed up as a judicial goon. The two wrestle for a few minutes, and Marnes finally gets the upper hand, so he springs for the gun cabinet, only to find that it's already gone. The goon already nabbed it, and he's got it trained on Marnes' chest. Not good. It looks like the person who poisoned that water bottle meant to finish the job. New question: who is the man in black? Is the man in black responsible for George's death? Well, that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed it, you already know what to do. Shout out once again to all the Discord people, the patrons, and you especially for making it to the end of this video. Season 1, episode 5 is coming soon, so keep them peeled. Stay safe out there and air conditioned if possible. Be good to yourselves and to others, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.